Welcome to Season 2 of the Making Bank podcast, where we continue our exploration of South Florida's entrepreneurial landscape with host Keith Costello, co-founder and CEO of Locality Bank. Sit back, relax, and let South Florida visionaries guide you on an entrepreneurial journey from tribulation to triumph, sharing the very stories that have shaped them.
Kelly, Alvarez, Vitale,
Hi.
Welcome to Locality Bank's Making Bank podcast.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So we're really excited to have you as our guest today. You've been heavily involved here in the South Florida community, both you and your husband, Randall. And, you know, it's actually really great to have a female entrepreneur. And unfortunately, because why aren't there more? There should be more. So we're hoping in talking with you today that you'll be an inspiration to a lot of young women or old women or medium-aged women out there.
Or people who want to have good partners in life, you know?
People who have good partners in life is a great saying, yeah. But women of all ages who will say, hey, Kelly did it. I can do it. I've got a dream. I want to start a business. So let's go back to your roots and your family, because a lot of times that's where entrepreneurial urges and conditioning starts in the family. So tell me about your early upbringing.
Yeah, so I am a first generation Cuban American. So my grandparents left Cuba. They were in their 40s or so. My parents were very little. They were, my mom was 9 years old. My dad was 6 years old. So while they are from Cuba, they're very much Americanized. But they left very successful businesses in Cuba. They were educated people, right? And so they came to this country with a whopping 3 things. And they had to start from scratch. So my grandfathers who owned their own companies, one became a janitor. They ended up in a small town, which is Belglade, Florida. It's on the southern tip of Lake Okeechobee. Don't judge. Great people come from there and good football players. And so they ended up there because there was a sugar, the sugar industry was there. Mm-hmm. And so because Cuba has a lot of sugar cane, that was natural for a lot of Cubans to migrate up there. So, these people became janitors. My grandmother, who was, a stay-at-home, affluent individual, had to become work in a packing house to pack lettuce,
Wow.
And so they really had to start from scratch. And so my dad's father, so my paternal grandfather, was working at the sugar mill. Somebody asked him if he could sell a watch and, go door to door, sell a watch. And he realized that he could sell a watch and make more selling that watch than he could working, being as a janitor in a sugar facility. And so he slowly just started selling watches door to door. And then that turned into owning a small little jewelry store in our small town. And my grandmother worked there. My dad worked there. My uncle worked there. This is in Belglade. Still, the jewelry store still exists. That's where my dad works. If you ever need good jewelry, let me know.
All right.
And then they built the big store. That's where my dad works today. And so they're a great testament of hard work and perseverance. These are people that didn't know the language.
Wow.
They didn't know the system. They didn't have any of the things that are afforded to me that, that I, often take for granted. And yet they figured it out. And so there's a mantra that I always say, like with my grandparents, like if my grandparents who did not know the language, didn't know the system, if they did not fail, how could I possibly fail with so many more advantages to me? Wow. So I really kind of take that to heart.
That is really powerful. That struck me as you said that, because, as we think about that, a lot of times it's like, how am I going to do this? How am I going to do that? But you look at the hardship that your family faced coming here. And I've heard those stories before, and it's always amazed me how many immigrant families come to the United States with nothing and become so successful.
So successful. The Cuban American story is incredible. The Jewish American story is incredible. There's, and even the Mexican community right now, like these are people that want to work. Their situation is very bad, but they're willing to come and work and make a better life for themselves. And they don't mind the hustle because where they're coming from is so much worse, that working nonstop seems like a better option than staying in their own country.
Well, I do hope, and I know I've heard from people, not to sidetrack, but from people in the construction industry, how difficult it's getting now with these new immigration laws that we put in place. And I really hope we can figure out, as I understand, protecting our borders.
100%.
But I also realize the power of bringing in people who really appreciate this country and want to succeed. So that's a great start that you got. So So tell me, what happened next for you in terms of your career?
So it's so funny because I saw my grandfather and my father and my uncle start this business and run this business, and they worked really hard and they worked a lot. And so I thought to myself, I am never going to start a company. Who wants to leave at 7:00 in the morning, 7:30, and then not get home till 7:30 at night? And so my route was I was going into corporate America. I was going to climb the corporate ladder. I was going to do the traditional thing, right? So I went to college at Florida State. I got my master's there as well. And then I went to go work for a big nonprofit. And even though it was a nonprofit, it was very much structured like a corporation, right? I mean, there's goals and sales goals and calls and things that you really needed to work at.
And it was American?
It was American Heart Association. Yeah. And what I realized here, I mean, at that point, I'm 24 years old. I was working with, people who were in their late 20s or 30s, and they had families. And I just didn't know how they were doing it. I didn't know how they were working 8 to 10 hour days and raising 2 or 3 kids, plus the commute, plus all of it, And I just remember thinking, this is going to be really challenging one day if I ever want to start a family. And again, at this point, I don't even have a husband. I don't even have a boyfriend, but I just knew maybe one day I have kids. And I thought something's got to give, because there's this mindset in corporate America prior to the pandemic where you have to be there for 8 hours. Even if you get your work done in 4, you have to sit there for 8 hours because that's what they're paying you to do. So you're really not incentivized to work harder because you just have to be there. And so I just remember thinking there has to be a better way where you can work smarter and reward yourself for that. So at that point, I'm at Heart Association for 5 or 6 years. I was working with community relations professionals. So people who give out, money to the community. Mm-hmm. And it's the job that everybody wants. Right. So it's the job that nobody retires from. People are in that role forever. I mean, you think Gail Butler, I always just think with AutoNation and Kim Bentley at JM Family. I mean, these were people in institutions that stay there. And so I thought, you could either wait for these people to retire and then try to apply for the job. But there's literally 10 jobs in the entire county to do community relations. Mm-hmm. Right. And so one day at this point, Randall and I are married. He's working for a bank at that point.
And how did you guys meet? Just aside, through charitable?
No, I had moved here. I didn't know a soul.
Yeah.
Probably was going to move back to Palm Beach County. And someone said, you should meet this guy. He's really involved. He can at least plug you into a few different groups. And so I emailed a stranger and said, hi, I'm looking for a friend. And so he took me out, platonically for drinks, just to whatever. And he said, here's some groups to get involved with. And we got involved with a young professionals group called Emerge Broward and met from there. So
that's cool.
So it was great. And so he was at a bank at one point, and we're making our bed one morning. And he says, hey, he's like, he got hit up by a charity for sponsorship. And this isn't his job. He's a banker, right? And he says, you know what? You should do this. I'm like, do what? He's like, you should get hired by mid-sized companies to handle their community relations for companies that can't afford having a full-time person. And I literally looked at him like, that is the dumbest idea ever. Who would ever hire me to do that? And he's like, well, I'm just saying, I think it's an idea. And Randall knows me well enough to be like, I'm just going to let that fester for a moment. I'm just not going to beat a dead horse. And so I walked away. I came back a week later and I said, well, what would that look like? Me starting my own company. He's like, well, I can help you with the finances and structuring it that way, but you got to do the work. And I was a public relations major. I got my master's in integrated marketing, communication. I didn't go to business school. I can barely count to 10 sometimes. And I bought a book on Amazon called How to Start a Company, How to Start a Business. And I would go to coffee shops, on downtimes and I taught myself. And that's the great thing, if you really want to start a company and you think I don't have the MBA or I don't have the whatever, there are so many free resources out there that'll tell you how to do it. And you just have to follow the steps.
That's amazing. And so this book that you bought, I mean, do you even remember the author? I mean, it's just
I don't. It's in my office, but it's called it was the #1 bestseller at that time, 10 years ago on Amazon on how to start a business.
Wow.
And so I just did the exercise there and I built the plan and I built the marketing strategy and to see is this a viable idea? Can I get hired by small and medium-sized companies to handle their corporate, community relations, corporate philanthropy, employee volunteerism? And here we are 11 years later.
So did you rely on any other resources in terms of getting started? Because we have a lot of organizations in the community, like the Small Business Development Corporations and SCORE and all these other initiatives. But did you go? You just did it through this book.
I just did it through the book, and then because we were very involved, we were both on a lot of committees and nonprofits and boards and so forth. And I'm just a big believer in your reputation and always doing good work, because that's what's going to vouch for you, right? That's what's, if somebody can be a good volunteer in the community, they must be stellar at their job as well, because the fact that they can balance both, community work and their actual job. And so I just always did, a lot of good in the volunteering that we did. And so I was able to call up on a lot of these people that I served on boards and committees with to either say, hey, could you hire me? Or could you open a door to a potential company that I'm trying to get into? And that's what people did. People opened the doors for me to get to get my first client. And it was, I'm very grateful for those individuals.
Yeah. So it is interesting. One thing I've certainly noticed being in business and being involved in the community, it's a small group of people when it comes right down to it.
Very small.
And, it was interesting. I was at the Riverwalk Trust.
Yes.
I was one of the honorees the other night. Thank you. But the reason I mention it is that as I looked out in that audience, it was like you knew everybody there. And it was the same people that you see, time and time again, involved in the community, doing things. They're on the corporate boards. They're involved in the charities and charitable organizations. So that's a powerful group that you really reached out to get the ball rolling.
I tapped into them and they helped. And I always say, I love 20 or however, I think I was 29 at that point, 29 or 30-year-old Kelly. I called all those people and said, even if you can't hire me, let me just pitch you. Let me tell you what I'm doing, so that if you're out in the community and you hear of something, you'll think of me. And so, I always, I had set up so many coffee meetings and so many presentations, just educating people on what I was doing, because I'm not a marketing agency. I'm not an advertising. I'm not a PR. I'm this very niched agency that only handles community relations. I only do corporate philanthropy and employee engagement. So I had to kind of teach people what it is that I was trying to do.
So let's hone in on that a little bit more. So kind of explain what you do for, and let me selfishly ask too, because because we're a bank, right? Yeah. But we're a new bank, right? But we still, it doesn't matter if you open your doors, the next day you're getting asked for money because you're a bank, right? Everybody thinks, oh, it's a bank. They got money. They sponsor things. And so it's a real challenge, because you have to, and as I was reading your bio and reading through what you've done, it makes so much sense, because that is a problem for a lot of institutions, because you want to be involved.
You want to give back.
You want to be seen as a community resource. That's the whole reason we started the bank. And so you really need a plan.
You need a plan.
So help us with that.
So I always say my elevator speech or pitch is, we get hired by companies, foundations, family offices, or government agencies to give away their money to nonprofits. And so we don't get hired by nonprofits. A lot of times I'll get calls like, oh, well, this nonprofit wants to hire you. No, we keep it very black and white, because I never want any of my clients to think that we are recommending a charity that's also paying us as well. So we only get hired, again, so companies, foundations, government agencies who have a bucket of money to give to the community, but can't justify having a full-time person. They hire our firm to be their outsourced community relations, or their outsourced corporate philanthropy or employee engagement. So we can handle anything from sponsorship requests, volunteer efforts, leadership groups, in-kind donations, speaking requests, anything that a company feels like they can give back to a community, we handle that for them. So one of the first things we do, a lot of times people will say, well, do you just come in and say, here are the 10 charities that you should give to? And I say, not at all, because the whole point of what we're trying to do is build a strategic philanthropic plan. We want to build a plan that aligns with a company or foundations or government agencies' goals, objectives, or marketing strategies. We really want to align the way that they give to the community that actually is going to affect their bottom line, right? Or that they see value to it. And so every plan is very different based on what that company or organization or foundation or government agency is trying to achieve. So we build a strategic philanthropic plan, and then we can manage that plan for them for a fraction of the cost. So they can say, we will become your outsourced community relations. All the asks for nonprofits, we become their point of contact for that company. And we manage the day-to-day for them.
And I love the part because it does tie back to the bottom line, right? Because we are a for-profit organization. We want to do things in the community that help, but we also want to tie those into our strategy so that it helps the bank to be able to continue to give back to the community, help to be able to become a bigger and better community partner. So, and I think you use that doing well by doing good, or is it doing good by doing well?
Our tagline is, you can do good and do well.
Right.
So you can do good by giving to your communities, but ultimately you should see philanthropy as just another business line item, right? In your books. Philanthropy, oftentimes people think like, well, I'm just going to hemorrhage money. I'm just going to give and give and give, but not really ask for what the return is. Mm-hmm. And we're saying, no, you can do good, but it really needs to align with what it is that you're trying to achieve so that you can do well as a company. Because guess what? My sweet spot are these small to medium-sized companies. Yes, we've been hired by, big name brand companies here locally. And that's great. But really the bread and butter are small and medium-sized companies who want to give. But if you were giving, if you had a software platform or an accounting software platform or whatever, that wasn't working for you and didn't save your company money, you'd probably get rid of it, right? Mm-hmm. So philanthropy is the only thing that we just continue to hemorrhage money without really asking a return, because we're like, oh, well, we're doing good in the community. Like it's okay, but you should be able to give, and it should be able to help your company in the long term achieve whatever, your business goals and objectives. We always say you should use philanthropy to help bridge the gap, to allow you to, to flourish, to allow you to meet certain goals that your company's trying to achieve.
Oh, that's great. And again, I'm asking this. So how do you charge the company? When you work with a company that's a great question.
So we have over 10 years of experience. And so now I have an idea. We have everything that we do is data driven. So a lot of the things that we do for our clients are data driven. So our company is data driven. So I have time logs to know like, hey, how much does this type of project take? So you could come in and say, hey, I'm looking to I want you to handle my sponsorship efforts. Another time, a client will say, hey, build the whole plan. Another client will say, build the plan and manage it. I have now data to say, hey, this is how many hours a month this project is going to take. And then we come up with a retainer fee, and that's how,
Excellent. Wow. So it's very clear. It's very clear. Transparent to the client.
Very much so.
Okay, awesome. Well, we're going to have a conversation after this.
Okay, I look forward to it. I look forward to
it because that is a problem that we have, and I'm sure other companies do as well. So you've been in business over 10 years. Yeah. You've got 15 employees.
I've had up to 15. Right now we're at 6.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, so it goes back.
Yeah. It just depends on the project.
And you probably outsource and things too, right?
Absolutely.
Absolutely right. So how did COVID affect your business?
This is so crazy. I thought when COVID hit, I was like, oh my gosh, we're going to have to close up, right? Because who's going to give money to the community when we're just trying to you couldn't even leave your door. So it's like, how are you going to be out in the community? And not only did companies double down and continue to give, right? So they gave to first responders, and they gave to relief efforts or hunger and homelessness issues that, things that we're causing. Not only did our companies continue to give, but we ended up opening up a whole nother side of our business. We got contacted by a lot of the municipalities in the town to say, hey, we have this CARES funding. So, there was money to give to businesses or nonprofits or residents to help them pay their bills because maybe they had lost their job. And then the ARPA money came, the Affordable Rescue Act plan. So there was all this money that municipalities had that they absolutely had to give to their communities, but did not know how to give it. And so they called us up and they said, hey, can you manage this for us? Can you help us give this money to our residents, to our businesses, to our nonprofits? And at that point, I said, no, this isn't what I do. Right? I do corporate philanthropy. I do sponsorships and in-kind donations and speaking requests and, so forth. And that is when, my husband, who serves as, a husband, a business coach, a therapist, he serves as a lot of different things.
Right.
He says, well, tell me how this is any different than what you do. Walk me through what your process is when you normally onboard a new client. okay, well, we devise goals, criteria, scorecards, we evaluate all the proposals, we give away the money. He goes, so what's the difference? He's like, you're just now, instead of giving the money to a nonprofit, you're giving it to an individual that meets the criteria and so forth. And so in COVID, we had our best year ever. Wow. Ironically, because we had gotten hired by all these municipalities to give back. And it was really our way of our company that we were, it was our way of being able to help during the pandemic to say, okay, like there's all this money. Now let's try to get it out to the community as quickly as possible to really help those who were suffering at that point.
Wow. And so from starting your business and getting up and running, did you self-finance this or did you have to get financing?
Yeah, great question. So I had an aunt that had passed away many, many years ago, and she did not have any children. And so she left a little bit of money to each of her nieces. And everybody spent the money. Everybody spent the money except for me. I didn't know what I wanted to do with it, but I wanted it to be meaningful. And so, yes, I took some trips and I did this, but when it came time to open up the business, I tapped into the funds that I had. And it depends on who you are. I mean, I think at that point I think I had $8,000 left. So it wasn't tons of money, but it was enough to get me up and running. And so I thought to myself, this is a great legacy for her, that I can take this money, invest it in myself, invest it in the business and grow it. And so that $8,000 becomes whatever it is, Wow. And so it was a really great way to just honor her legacy. So that money just continues in theory.
That's beautiful.
To give. And I will say, I have friends who are entrepreneurs as well, and they have done this on their own from beginning to end. I was also married at that point, so I could take a risk. I knew that we weren't going to be hungry.
Right.
There was going to be food on the table at the end of the day. Right. My husband did have a job and so forth. Yeah. So I always share that because, I didn't do this on my own. I did have help that I know not everybody has that access.
Yeah. Well, that's very humble of you to say that. But certainly I think having a good partner, a spouse or a family member or somebody else who's just there as a sounding board that is not necessarily somebody that is on your staff, right? That's that really has your best interests. Yeah. And I know for myself, my wife has been that for me. Yeah. When I really need, because there's no filter there, right? Right. I mean, they will tell you what you won't get.
The blind spot.
If you're paying somebody, they're not gonna want to tell you anything too bad because you might fire them. Yeah. So it's really so it's interesting that you say that because I feel the same way as well. So I saw something about the I can't monster. Oh, yeah. So tell us about the I can't monster.
Oh, the I can't monster. The I can't monster is always saying you can't do something, right? You shouldn't start a business. You shouldn't, this client's not going to hire you. You don't know what you're doing, whatever. And so it's always just in the back of your mind. And so I've had to work really hard over 10 years to be like, okay, I can do this. I can figure this out and I can tackle this. So, we go back to COVID and the example that I just gave. It could have been it could have been very easily for me to say to that client, no, this isn't what we're going to do. We don't do this type of work. This doesn't really fit into my perfect bubble and so forth. And I could have said no because the I can't monster was saying, this isn't your line of work. You don't know what you're doing. And it took somebody else, again, at that point, it was my husband, to say well, walk me through it. How is that any different? And all of a sudden you have these aha moments of oh, I can do it. I can't figure it out. And now I'm at the point where I've started a company. I have 2 children. I think I'm doing a decent job. I can probably figure most things out, and that's kind of anytime the I can't monster comes, I think to myself, well, what have I been able to figure out? And it's almost everything. Every challenge that has gotten put on my plate, I've been able to figure it out. And so that's how I'm able to, to combat that on some of those
So
days.
Little by little, the success and the confidence builds, and the I can't monster is...
It's subsided, but he or she comes back very often. Oh, yeah. I mean, this is not I have mastered the I can't monster. Not at all.
I think if most people are honest, they would say the same thing, right? If you're launching a business, there's always going to be another challenge, and some of them are wow, it's eye-opening.
I always say somebody, they ask the question sometimes of well, what do you know now that you didn't know back then? And I just thought that, once you get to a certain place in business, okay, once you get to that pinnacle, whatever your goal was, you're going to be fine. It's going to be great. But then you reach it and then there's another challenge and then you reach that other challenge and then there's you're always, you're always changing, you're always evolving, you're always adapting. And I've just come to learn like that's just part of the business. It's just a business is almost like a relationship. It's never stagnant. It's always changing. And so I just have to be comfortable knowing that I'm never going to get to this perfect place. It doesn't exist.
Well, that's great advice for anybody, really. And so also during COVID, you told me you had a baby. I mean, so this was like a pretty, you're probably the most productive person
very productive,
I've talked to during COVID right now.
We ended up having a little girl at 40 years old. I was 40 years old and had to starting all over again. But at that point, I had a great team. I had a great team that was able to really step in and say, okay, I didn't have to be in the day-to-day. The company could survive because my team was stellar. Coincidentally, I had lost somebody. I think I had the baby. I had trained somebody for 4 or 5 months to kind of be my point of contact so that I could take a few weeks of maternity. And I think week 1.5 of maternity leave, she calls me and tells me that she's quitting.
Oh my gosh.
And I was like, I can't even believe this. And so I called a former teammate of mine who I'd kept a great relationship with. And I said, she had been with me for 5 years at that point, but had left to do other things. And I called her and I said, I don't care if you're with me for a week, 3 weeks, or if you want to stay for an eternity. I'm in the spine. I need somebody to just hold the ship together until I come back. And she said, absolutely, whatever you need. And I mean, she's ultimately stayed with the company. She's been great. And I'll do anything, I'm hustling. I always say I'm hustling to keep that team member because she has saved me in a time that I was very, very vulnerable. And I'm very grateful for her. So again, hiring good people is just so essential.
Oh, it definitely is. Yeah. So with everything that you've experienced from, starting in an entrepreneurial family to launching your own business and going through COVID and all these other challenges, the ICANT monster, what piece of advice would you give to a listener who's thinking about starting a business? What's the best piece of advice you would give?
Kind of what I alluded to earlier, that I suffer from perfectionism, right? I always, I want everything to be perfect. You think okay, if I build the business this way and I get to this point, everything's going to be great and it's going to be status quo. And it's not. I think I got trapped for a lot of years on striving for perfection versus striving for excellence. Perfection is unattainable. You are going to mess up. There are going to be glitches. Things are going to happen. You cannot control every aspect of your life, of your business, and so forth. So, but if you can strive for excellence and make sure that you're hiring the right people, putting standard operating procedures in place so that if somebody goes down, the institutional knowledge is not gone. Training and investing in your team. That's really where I've learned at the beginning. We're just trying to strive for excellence, and each and every day we cannot strive for perfection because it doesn't exist.
Well, that's great advice. Yeah. And we all probably need to remember that from day to day.
Me too.
So I wanted to ask you one other thing that you mentioned, because we were talking about, in corporate America, if you work 4 hours and you get all your work done, but they still expect you to be in the office for 8 hours. So let's talk about work from home for a minute, because I've had a lot of people, we have a lot of remote employees, and I've had, some of my board members are, they're like, oh, you sure this remote stuff works? And, everybody wants people to come back to the office. So I'm still trying to figure it out. Absolutely. But, I kind of agree with what you said, because I can remember, when everybody's in the office, I mean, who knows who's doing what, unless you're sitting there watching somebody all day, or you've got their laptop, you've got spyware in their laptop. How do you know what they're doing all day? Yeah. So what's your thought on that?
So I was working remote before working remote was cool. My whole team was always working remote. I made the conscious decision. I didn't want to be in the office micromanaging people, right? And watching the clock, what time did they come in? Are they late? Did they leave too early? I knew that was just going to eat me up. And I didn't want to be managed that way either.
Right.
And so, before the platforms were even what they are now, we were using antiquated platforms, but we were all working technically remote. And so I've hired both men and women. I probably have hired more women just because of the nature of the job. I wanted to give people the flexibility from the get-go to be work is a piece of what you do. It's not everything that you do. So I want to give you the flexibility to live your life. So you've got to get the work done. The work has to get done, and it has to be done by the deadline. So that there's a non-negotiable there. You do that work at 6 o'clock in the morning. You're a night owl. You do it at 3 o'clock in the morning. You want to pick up your kids from school and answer a few emails in the car. You want to sit at the beach and do something. I don't care. I need you to get the work done, and I need you to get it done, and I need you to get it done right. And also, as a small business, I didn't want the overhead.
Right.
I didn't want, because what you're going to have to make to just cover the basics of your office, your rent, your AC, your Wi-Fi, whatever. I didn't want that added cost. So this has kept us flexible and nimble, that I just don't have to deal with an additional cost, and, we can, make the company more profitable. So
we agree on that completely. So, I mean, you could see this office is this is it for us, this is our world headquarters, as we call it. And so we tried to use that same model where, less real estate, fewer people, better technology. Yeah. We have people working all over the country. So I subscribe to that same, and I don't care either. Some people say, I saw so-and-so at, the shopping mall today as I was driving, and, well, so what? Are they doing their work?
Right.
To your point.
Are they doing, and because I'm a mom of 2 small children, I want to be involved in my kids' lives. So,
right.
you try to either volunteer at the school or so forth. And so there's going to be gaps in the middle of the day. But guess what? I put my kids down at night. I'm back on the computer, and then I'm working until I catch up. So it gives me the flexibility to be the mom I want to be or the wife I want to be, but still get the work done and so forth. And I think people want that flexibility. People want, they're capable of managing that.
That's great.
Yeah.
So now we're going to go to the lightning round.
All right, let's do it.
So we're going to hit you with a few fast, quick questions.
I'm ready.
So favorite book?
I really enjoy Gallup's Strength Finders. I don't know if you've read it, but it tells you what your natural strengths are, where you normally get your energy from. So we have invested a lot of time in our, when we're hiring people, to ensure that, they might tell me they're good at one thing, but we really see how they do on the Strength Finders to say, I don't really think that they're going to fit in this particular role, despite what they said. So
a great book. And I agree. And it's really about putting people, right, find their strength and let them do that, right?
Let them do that and let them get energy.
Absolutely.
From that.
Great book. Podcasts that you like to listen to?
I'm listening to 3. One is The Happiness Lab by Dr. Laurie Santos from Yale.
I'm going to write these down.
She has got the most popular class in Yale of how to be happy. And it's telling you what your mind tells you, what you should do to be happy versus what the science tells you to do.
Okay.
And it is fascinating how we are living our life incorrectly, thinking of how we think we should be happy, and the science is telling us something else. So Laurie Santos is fantastic.
Great.
There is NPR offers, it's called Parenting Life Kit. So it just gives you good nuggets on, how to try to survive parenthood. And then I also listen to, it's called Abiding Together. It's a faith-based podcast. So
great. Those are the best. Those are the best ones we've had yet. So what are you most grateful for?
This is token, but I'm grateful for my health, because at the whopping age of 41, I have had a lot of friends who have had significant health scares, and some did not make it. And they would kill to have lived to be 40 or 41 or see their kids graduate and so forth. So I am very grateful for my health, and invest a lot of energy in trying to keeping myself healthy to make it to my child's wedding one day or meet my grandkids or so forth. Because I know I'm going to be a very old lady by the time my youngest, by the time Presley possibly gets married or decides to have children.
It'll happen, because I was a 45-year-old father, so I know, right? So my son is just graduating from FSU, so
go Noles.
Yeah, my youngest son. So. Favorite destination?
I've had a few. I'm going to say my favorite place that I still want to go to. I've done Italy, but I did Italy as a poor college student. So I want to go back to Italy with a little bit of money and and just really do Italy right. So I want to go to southern Italy. And
you mentioned that, and it's I don't know if you saw the cover of the Wall Street Journal today. The Pope is on the cover of the Wall Street Journal with a plate full of cannolis, and I'm like, that's Italy.
That's amazing. That's amazing. I want to live that life.
Who would you want to have dinner with? This could be someone living or dead.
This is always a tough one, because you're supposed to say, all these great world leaders and so forth. I often think about my paternal grandmother. She passed away while I was in college. I would have loved for her to have met my husband and my children. My maternal grandmother got to do that. And so I would have loved for her to have met them. So I'd have a dinner with her and she can meet my family.
Oh, that's beautiful.
I'm going to get teary-eyed with you.
That's very nice. How about best moment and worst moment in business?
Best moment when I got my first client and I got the first check. I mean, I think we took a picture. I was like, had the cheesiest smile, and like I just couldn't even believe that somebody had hired me and paid me to do this.
Can you tell us who that was, or is that violating something?
It was Styles Corporation. So Styles is one of my first clients.
Well, that makes sense.
And I remember getting that first check, and I mean, I opened it up and Randall took a picture, and I'm just like cheesing because I was just so I was so happy with it. The hardest moment, it's the daily hustle, right? No one is going to bring you business. No one is just, you just can't exist and think that someone's just going to magically walk through your door and bring you business. And so it is a constant daily thing where you are going out and you're drumming up business, you are hunting, you are trying to do it. And so it's not the worst thing. It's a constant, so if you're ever, if you want to grow your company, if you're if you want to get it to the next level, it's you doing the work. So you just need to be ready to do that kind of work.
And on that note, how can people get a hold of you that are interested in hiring you or talking with you about what you do?
So again, I'm old fashioned in the sense of, you can technically email me, you can text me, you can call me, you can find me on Facebook, LinkedIn, and all that kind of good stuff. All of our information's on our website, which is, we have shortened it so that people can spell it correctly. It's www.stratphil.com, short for Strategic Philanthropy. So stratphil.com.
STRATPHIL. PHIL.com. Great.
Yep.
So, and last, you already did tell us the best advice you had. So let me ask you one last one, which is favorite restaurant.
In the world or in Fort Lauderdale? What are we talking about?
I would prefer Fort Lauderdale.
Okay.
So it's somewhere I can go, like if I want to go to dinner tonight.
A little pricey, but I think the food is delicious and the service is exceptional. If you've not been to Evelyn's at the Four Seasons, it is divine.
I would agree. We have been there, but really you reminded me to go there again. So,
really good.
Kelly, thank you so much. It's been a real pleasure.
All right, pleasure.
Thanks for tuning in to Locality's Making Bank podcast. Be sure to subscribe on your favorite podcast platform to catch the latest episodes, and visit localitybank.com today to learn more about all the benefits of banking local.